that doesn't mean just because the session right now is not going on that issues aren't still out there, right? There are some issues that have effectively died, and some that are still out there that have to be resolved. Jim, let's talk about some of those. What issues, let's just talk about, first of all, what issues are dead? Just were important issues, or they were intensely debated and lobbied. What issues are dead now as a result of this happening?
Well, probably one of the biggest is the attempts to reform the prison system, which has been just hit with a barrage of stories and reports over the past year of inmate abuse and cover-ups and everything else. The Senate really went hard, and Dara's covered this. She knows all the ins and outs of it, but the Senate went really hard to try to pass a bill to reform the correction system. That is dead, dead, dead. There's issues like Speaker Crisafulli has put a lot of emphasis on water policy, wanting to pass a complete water policy bill. The two chambers couldn't agree on how to do that. That died. There are going to be issues in the budget related to water projects and, Amendment 1 funding. But in terms of a policy bill, which the Speaker emphasized a lot, they're not going to pass that. I mean, there's issues like medical marijuana. There's talking about trying to do a fix to get the limited medical marijuana that was passed last year, get that moving. That died. Alimony reform died. There's also a whole bunch of education issues that were wrapped into two train bills that are just sitting out there, and we don't know whether a lot of them are policy. There could be some budget issues in there too that that could reemerge during the budget discussions. But there's a bunch of education issues out there. There's a whole host of healthcare bills that are dead. I mean, things are, there's casualties all over the Capitol, and I think that's one of the things that frustrated a lot of people about this early shutdown was that there was potential they could work some of that stuff out in the final days, which is usually when stuff like that actually comes together.
There was a major education policy initiative on both sides to essentially allow parents to take their children, if they could pay for the transportation, to any state in the school that wasn't at capacity. That is essentially dead now. I mean, there's a slim chance they could bring it back in the budget discussions, but not a great one. So again, sort of like Jim was saying, there are a ton of they may not have been the marquee issues of the session, but there are a ton of those pretty significant policy changes that just are dead now. They're gone.
You did a lot of work during session on the budget itself, right? And being a veteran reporter about the budget, that there are lots of policy issues that can be resurrected in budget discussions. What do you anticipate, knowing that the budget has got to be passed, what are some of the issues that you're going to keep your eye on for being resurrected as budget issues?
Well, lobbyists and lawmakers tend to be very creative sometimes with the budget. There was a big blow up in the session several years ago when they tried there were tons of budget related bills that had policy stuck into them. So anything that a lobbyist or a lawmaker can make a case is even tangentially connected to the budget, they're going to try to get stuck into one of those bills. It's going to be interesting to watch how willing leadership is to go down that road, because the last time they went a long way down that road, it caused its own session blow up. Certainly, and this is an issue Dara's covered quite a bit, gambling is something, at least when it comes to the Seminole Compact, that could be an upwards of $100 million issue for the state budget. That would be money they would badly like, for example, if they have to fill a hole on lip. I think that's sort of the issue that's really the X factor out there is how far they want to go on that particular issue. But certainly some of these education issues could be wrapped in. And the Houses and Scott seem to be talking about maybe reforming some of the state's health care laws through this budget process. that would be very complicated, and it would cause a lobbying war unlike anything we've seen recently in Tallahassee.
They're not going to do the gambling thing when they come back for the special session. What Brandon's talking about is a portion of a deal that the state has with the Seminole tribe that gives the Seminoles exclusive rights to have banked card games like blackjack at most of its casinos.
That's the $100 million issue?
It's a little more than $100 million a year. So the Seminoles pay the state a certain amount of money a year, a minimum guaranteed amount, in order to have that exclusivity. That portion of the compact is called a compact with the state, between the state and the Seminoles, expires on June 30th, just like the budget, right? So they have 90 days to finish up having the games, and then they have to shut them down. They've expressed, their lawyer, Barry Richard, has expressed questioned whether or not they actually would have to shut the games down, but they have until October to shut down the games. So the state really thinks that they can go ahead and sign a new deal with them sometime up until October without it creating another standoff, but without it creating a terrible fix. So I don't expect them, the senators who I know who are heading negotiations with the tribe, don't expect them to resolve that, but they aren't using the money from the compact in their budget right now. I don't think they're including it in there. No, they are not. Okay. And I don't expect that. I do think they could do something about prisons in the conforming bills. They have privatized, the health care services for prisons that way before. So that is something that they still maybe could address. But I think certainly what you're going to see, I think, more wheeling and dealing is going to be on the health care, maybe mental health arena, and the health care issues played out in the budget, since that's sort of the last vestige for hope for them.
Well, I think a huge piece that's uncertain at this point is what's going to happen with tax cuts. I mean, Governor Scott has made that a centerpiece of his campaign last year. He proposed $673 million in tax cuts before session. Then the House comes in and trumps him a little bit and says, let's do 690, and throw a few more sales tax holidays on the fire, But with all these issues about how much money they may have to put into health care, and the Senate has never put together a full package of tax cuts. They've been sort of laid in the weeds on that issue. And so that's a huge issue that's going to have to be resolved as part of the budget. And I mean, it absorbs policy as well as has dollar figures attached. Brandon also has covered quite a bit the issue of school funding. I mean, that is a flat-out budget issue. It's not really a policy issue, but it's a huge outstanding question of how much money they can put into public schools, because Governor Scott, again, campaigned last year that he was going to have the highest per-student funding in state history. And again, when you've got these questions about whether they're going to need money for other things, how much money are you going to have to put into that? I do think there's some other sort of funky issues out there that could get thrown into the budget. One is stadiums, stadium funding. President Gardner has made clear that he'd like to take home some money to Orlando for a soccer stadium, and the House has shown no real interest in it. But when the wheeling and dealing starts, that may be something he pushes for that isn't really just straight up budget issue, but it does involve money. So
we have talked about the issues that just died in the session. Well, did anything get done that is of significance?
One of the major things they did do is they did some reform of the state's testing system. There was a lot of concern coming into the session even that students were being asked to spend too much time on state tests and district tests. And then, just as the session was getting underway, you had the state's new online testing program sort of melt down for about a week. And then there was another hiccup a little bit later on. And so what they've done is they've capped the number of hours that students can spend on state or district order tests. They've gotten rid of a lot more of the district tests than the state tests, but they've freed the districts up to dump a lot of their tests. They've gotten rid of a couple of repetitive state tests. And they hope that between those two things, really, they can sort of calm that situation down. That was one of the major issues of the session. It may have been the most significant thing they've actually gotten done this year. That's already been signed by Scott, and so that's a done deal.
It seems like such a long time ago because we've been so focused on this meltdown of the past week, and that happened early on in the session.